Hello, everybody. We are here for the next versus virus how-to session, and this one will be specifically about problem framing. So we will have around 20-25 minutes for the presentation itself, and then we will have time for questions and answers. So if you have any, then during the presentation already, you can start typing them into the chat function, or you can, of course, jump online with your microphone and your camera after the presentation itself and ask questions when we're done. I propose during the presentation potentially not to jump in with the questions because there might be things that are following up, but we can go into thorough discussion right after. So without further ado, my name is Peter Horvath, and let me share my screen and bring on the content. So hopefully you are seeing everything. Yes. So as mentioned, this is a problem framing for the May edition of the Versus Virus. I will be talking around three things today. One will be the first one, realizing the bigger picture of the problem or issue that you are working on. The second one, exploring the bigger picture. And the third one, starting to work on the solution. So all of these I'll look at from the perspective of framing the problem. And I'll get into what that is. But already I'm mentioning, as you can see, there are, of course, overlaps between realizing the bigger picture, exploring it, and then starting to work on the solution. So, these things are not directly, or disconnected. So as mentioned, my name is Peter Horvath. Why should you trust what I'm saying? I'm originally an economist. Right now I'm working as a consultant in Geneva in digital fields, user experience, digital strategy, and service design. I have been active in digital and human-centered roles for the past 17 years. I also co-founded and lead Geneva's largest meetup group. I'm also the co-founder of the Service Design Network Swiss chapter, and I recently graduated from the Executive MBA of EPFL in Lausanne. So let's jump in and look at the first topic, which is root causes. So this is around realizing the bigger picture. Very often, and this is true for large organizations as well as startups, as well as hackathons, people jump on a solution, be it an idea or something that already exists. People start from the solution space. But instead, what you should do is rather look at the problem. The problem, might be a customer need. It might be the challenge that underlies either the service or the product or the company itself. But it's what the solution is the answer for. And instead of focusing on the solution, you should be, of course, focusing on the problem. But even that is not as simple because every problem has multiple underlying causes. And it's worth exploring that a bit. So the way that this looks, if there's a problem, what you can do, and this is, a really good exercise that you can do relatively quickly as well, there are multiple causes or multiple reasons that feed into that problem. And what you can do is, identify what actually these underlying areas are. Originally, in this type of root cause analysis, there are 6 main elements that are usually used, being people, management, processes, environment, equipment, and materials. As you can see, this comes rather from the manufacturing space. Nevertheless, it is something that you can start with if you want to start out with your root cause analysis. Then you can put up these 6 things and start seeing if there are issues around people or management or processes that really contribute to the problem you have. And what you should do is under each of these main categories, you can list some problems or some causes that fuel the problem. This is called an Ishikawa diagram, or also a fishbone diagram. So you can look that up if you want some further detail on it. But basically, the way that it works, it doesn't need to be 6 underlying root categories. It can be 4, it can be 2 as well. The idea is to look at your problem and look at why that problem actually comes to life. So for something, around the COVID, the problem might be there's a global pandemic that has a chokehold on society and economy. Of course, it is a very big, broad problem, so not an ideal one, but still you can start breaking it down. what caused this. For example, healthcare was an issue, so there was no warning system built into the system, or something that there was a warning system but wasn't working properly. Then you can also look at the environment. Planetary health is one of the topics that comes up very often, whether humanity is taking too much space from nature. So you can sort of put together some underlying causes that fuel this. And the way you should be thinking of a problem and its causes is it's really the causes are the engine. So if you're familiar with Star Trek, it's a bit like the Starship Enterprise. The root causes are the engine, and then you have the saucer section, which is really the problem itself. And you can shoot at the saucer section, the whole problem will continue on going. What you have to actually target are the engines, are the root causes. And once you get rid of those, then the Starship problem will stop. So we'll get rid of the Starship Enterprise here and get to the next piece. So the previous one was realizing that there is a bigger picture to what you're looking at. It's not the solution or the idea that you should start working on, but rather identify what the problem is that solution answers, and even then look at what causes that problem to appear. Now let's look at exploring the bigger picture that you've identified. And this is really the core around problem framing. And there's 7 little very simple exercises that I will list out here that you can do to explore a bit before jumping into actually doing. So the first one, really simple, is called the 5 whys, and it's really what it seems to be. So if you got to your problem, you ask, okay, why is that a problem? And then people will tell you, either teammates or people and the experts who you are talking with, or the users who you are talking with, will tell you a reason. But that reason is very rarely the real reason why they feel that is a problem. So you should again ask, why is that reason that you gave, what's behind that? And you can go back, to the answer of root causes on why either this is a problem on a institutional level, if you're looking at solving an institutional problem, or why this is a problem for users if you are solving a user problem. So for example, my children are home and this is a problem. Okay, why is it a problem? Well, because they're always around and they make a lot of noise. Okay, so why is that a problem? Well, because I can't focus properly, I can work properly, I have to keep them occupied. So you get down to more specific reasons for the problem space that you're exploring. Another similarly useful exercise is to bring outsiders into the discussion. It's always, and this is again true for smaller knowledge organizations, hackathons and everything, that like-minded people tend to cluster around, and they have shared views, they have shared experiences, so they can understand each other very quickly. But this also creates a bubble of thinking. And what you can do by bringing outsiders into the discussion is forcefully break outside of that bubble. It's you decide that, okay, we know what this area is, we all agree. Now let's listen to someone who sees this from a completely different perspective. So for example, if you're looking at solving an institutional problem in healthcare, for example, maybe you can, and you've been talking to the doctors or the nurses, then you should talk with a patient. But you can also go into a very different area and talk, for example, someone who's working in hotels. That is a slightly comparable service. Or you can also look at elderly homes. So get really an outside perspective and see how other people than the ones you've been talking to, or the ones who you are, perceive that problem. A third exercise can be to get definitions in writing. So as I mentioned, the groups very often, that you work in, either in project groups or in the hackathon group, they tend to come to an understanding on, what the problem is, or what the solution is, or what the goal is. And that is very good. But very often, even single words that we say, we understand it in one way, and other people understand it in a very different one. And so the idea here is to write down what you think that agreed area is, whether that agreed thing is the goal of what you're doing, or that agreed thing is, the problem that you are solving. Everybody individually should write it down, and then you should compare them. And if they are, wildly different, then obviously you need to work on it a bit more. And the point here is not to point someone out that, hey, you understood it wrong. Everyone understood it right. Everyone understood it the way that they see it. So what you should get is an aligned understanding of that problem after these definitions are in writing. It's just makes things more tangible. Then the fourth one is asking what is missing. So similarly to how I mentioned at the beginning that we tend to jump into solutions, and we tend to start working on something as soon as we see it, and there's an idea, okay, let's work on it before even exploring what problem that solves. This asking what's missing is very similar, because we as human beings tend to jump on the things that are provided to us and try to resolve the issue based on that, and we believe that we know everything because there is information provided to us. Rather, instead of jumping into things, you should first ask, take a step back and ask, okay, I have this information, and let's presume that this is not all the information. What is missing? If you have data around COVID cases, do you also have the age of the people who with those cases? Do you also have geographic distribution? Do you also have the underlying symptoms or original cases? You should ask, okay, what is missing before actually jumping and trying to solve the problem based on the data or information that is at hand. Now, the next three ones I'll illustrate with little stories. So the fifth little exercise is considering multiple categories. The story here is that there was an airport where generally the passengers' satisfaction with the airport service was generally high, but there was one area where it was low, which was baggage claim, because the problem was that people had to wait for a long time to get their bags. So the airport understood this as a problem with the speed of delivering the packages. They understood it as a sort of process problem. So they looked at speeding up the time that it takes for the bags to be taken off the airplane and to the baggage claim area. And they did this, and then the story goes that another, continued surveys were done, and people were still dissatisfied with how long it takes for the bags to be delivered, even though the airport at this point was delivering the baggages from the airplane to the baggage claim area above industry or under industry timing. So they were better than the industry average, and yet people were dissatisfied. And then they reframed the problem. Okay, they considered it to be a different category. Instead of it being a problem with the speed of the bags coming from the airplane to the baggage claim, they looked at what if the problem is with the people coming from the airplane to the baggage claim area. And what they actually found out is that because this was a relatively small airport, the time it takes for passengers to get off the plane and get to the baggage claim area was really fast. So even though they were delivering bags pretty quickly, it was still perceived as slow. So what they actually did is they slowed down the people coming in. So they made some turns and put out some information that slows down people a bit. And so they got to the baggage claim area a bit later, and the problem of late delivery of bags was gone. The next one is to analyze positive exceptions. So this is again a rating example. The problem was that at an office building, the elevator, there were claims that the elevators are too slow. So instead of jumping and trying to speed up the elevators, what people did is, okay, people are saying that the elevators are too slow. Is there any time when they are not saying that they are too slow? Or is there a specific time when they are saying that the elevators are too slow? And they found out that the workers perceived the elevators to be slow only at lunchtime. And that led them to the realization that, yes, of course, because lunchtime is the most concentrated time for people to be going in and out of the building. So instead of speeding up the elevators, what you can do is maybe spread lunch time over a longer time, or maybe you can actually even deliver lunch to each of the floors and reduce the number of people who are leaving each and every floor, thus occupying the elevators and freeing it up for other people. And the last exercise that you can do to really reframe your problem is to question the objective. So this is my example. I was in Seattle a couple of years ago, and I visited the Space Needle. And the Space Needle is one of the landmarks of Seattle. So there's usually a big lineup to buy the tickets. And you could think that, okay, if there's a long line to buy the tickets, then maybe we could add more people to sell tickets so that those lines go faster. But instead, question the objective. Why are people standing in line? The quick answer is, well, they're standing in line to buy tickets, but that's the wrong reason. People are actually standing in line to see the Space Needle, to see the structure, to see the museum that's inside. So what they did is they actually moved parts of the museum outside into the waiting area. So as people were queuing up, they could actually read information. They could already fulfill the objective that they came for while standing in line to buy the ticket. And so the time for waiting, passed much quicker. The irony here is that when I was visiting the Space Needle, there was no one there because I had the chance to visit, in the middle of the weekday. There was no one there, and it took me still a long time to buy the ticket because I stopped at all the exhibition pieces that were shown in the waiting area, even though there was no one in front of me. So, as a summary for this problem framing, these are the 7 little exercises that you can do, and I have linked to an article which details some of this in more detail. And then the third area, getting to a solution and starting to work on the solution. So we identify that there is a bigger problem space. We have explored that problem space more thoroughly. Now we have identified what we are working on. How do we do that better, in a bit more better framing? So there's the saying that if all you have is a hammer, then every problem that you see is a nail. And people usually bring that up as a problem that this is a problem and you should focus broadly. And I actually think that this is a good thing, that if you have a hammer, then your solution space is more focused. Instead of trying to think more broadly, what you should do is first have a hammer, then imagine that you have a rubber duck, and then imagine that you have a skirt or a car, meaning that every time just switch the tools that you're thinking of. And here's an example on how that can be done. So when you are looking at either the problem that you're facing or the idea or the solution, depending on what point you are at, think of only the facts, the objectives, the objective data, the facts, the gaps in the facts that are there laid down in front of you. And look at only that and think of what is there, what can we do with that, what do these facts, these data, these unquestionable things tell us? Then you had the discussion and you move on, and then you say, okay, now we forget the facts and we only look at emotions. This is the subjective part. It's gut feelings, intuitive areas. And very often you will have multiple types of people in your group, and some will by default gravitate more towards talking about the facts. Some others will gravitate more towards talking about the emotions and being more intuitive. And what you can do with this exercise is get everyone at the same table so that, okay, we are now all talking about gut feelings, intuitive things, emotions. And that will simplify the cooperation between team members as well, and also help you focus your discussion. There's a third area that you can do is focus on logical negatives. Like, this is being the pessimistic, which I think that at these times maybe comes more natural to many of us than usual. So in this type, act as a pessimist. Just think about the negative impacts, be really careful, think about what can go wrong, and write those things down, maybe list those out, categorize those or prioritize those, think of what the biggest 3 negative impacts could be, and come up with solutions on how those can be mitigated. Then again, you can switch thinking and only think of the logical positives. Okay, what happens if this thing that we're working on really works, if it really takes off? Where could it go? How does it scale? Like, how the good things, what if this all goes well? What will be the next step? What can we do? If we get all the money, then what do we do? So this is really about thinking positively, thinking about the best outcomes and all the potential that the topic that we're working on has in itself. Then there's a fifth one, and I believe that this might be one of the most difficult things, which is thinking creatively. Because, this is thinking around new ideas outside of the box and thinking big. And this comes very natural to many people, to artists, designers. This is very often a basic thing that they do. But for other people, it's something very challenging that they can't really, wrap their heads around on how to do this. What a good idea for, if you feel that there are challenges for you to think creatively, is just think of a different industry. So whatever you are solving for, if you're solving a problem in healthcare, then for a bit think about, okay, how are similar problems solved in manufacturing or hotels or travel or anything that you are familiar with? And this already gives you a different point of view. Now there's, an entire session or courses can be held that are held on creativity. So I will not try to, make you creative thinkers in a few minutes, but basically by doing all of these different kinds of steps already enables you to think more broadly and thus creatively about a problem. And then the last piece that you can do is really think about planning. Again, there are some people for who this comes naturally, that as soon as they start hearing about something, they want to set up a timeline. They want to set up, benchmarks to other services. They will want to see what we will be measuring against. They want to see what the main things to achieve are, what the main objectives. And this is really around organizations. This is making choices between the different options that are available, really looking at the timing. And this is also something that the entire team should come together instead of one person, being the pain in the ass for everyone and trying to always steer back things into, okay, but guys, let's think of timing. Instead, you should sometimes say that, guys, let's talk about timing. Let's talk about planning piece. And then everyone agrees, okay, now for 5 minutes or an hour or whatever is decided, we talk about just the planning and we don't talk about the negatives. We don't talk about the positives. We just think about the planning and structures. And this is called the 6 thinking hats. Again, I linked to further details on this as a video. And I think that this idea of 6 thinking hats really simplifies the way to think about it, because every time that you want to talk about facts, you say, guys, let's put on our white hat. Every time you want to talk about emotions, okay, everybody, let's put on our red hat and think about emotions. And when you want to go, into logical negatives, you say, guys, I'm wearing my black hat here, bear with me. What if this happens? And then everybody, okay, let's put on the black hat and think about those things. And so it's a good, picture to put in your mind, and a good way to put everyone on the same page. And okay, guys, it's yellow or green hat time or whatever. So as a summary, we looked at 3 areas. We looked at realizing there's a bigger picture. My message is to love the problem and not the solution. Find underlying problems, root causes, question whether you are actually addressing the right problem. But I didn't mention that you will find multiple root causes. And what you could do is, instead of focusing on the main problem, you then try to solve only one of these specific root causes. That will help you to focus your problem. Very often in hackathons, the problem that teams are trying to solve is really big. It is really helpful to be more focused and more specific. And when you are presenting at the end of this hackathon, then you can also use this logic. Now, you should not, tell the judges your entire way of thinking. Rather say, We looked at the problem space, we identified these root causes, and we focused on this one. And this will give them the understanding that, okay, you are focusing on the thing that you're focusing on for a specific reason. You've thought this through. It's not just, by accident that you're thinking of this. Then the next piece was exploring the bigger picture. So here, reframe the problem using one of the seven or some of the seven simple methods that I mentioned to you. Know which problem you are solving and know what the impact of it is, and ensure that you are solving, real problems. So things that really do exist and things that it's not a solution that you put in place and will not have an effect. And then last, start when you're starting to work on the solution. Approach solutions with different thinking hats. Instead of the group pulling apart because people are thinking in different ways, ensure that there's a cue, the thinking hats that pulls the thinking together. And also, it's very important to know when to switch between these. So if you've been going on, on a big run, then sometimes say, guys, let's stop for a minute and put on our black hat and think on how this could go wrong. And I'm not saying to always pull in the brakes, but sometimes rethink things. So there will need to be some people who, or everyone should be able to put this out, but it should be maybe someone who you assign as, pay attention to always point out when we're getting too far into one direction, and then everybody can listen on to that. So that was it. I wish you good luck. And as mentioned, we are open for questions. So I don't know if in the meantime, as I was speaking, if we received any questions to the chat. So I will stop sharing for a minute, and either you can start writing into the chat, or if you want, you can unmute yourself, turn on your camera as well, and just directly ask the question if you have any. So let's see if there's anyone brave enough to ask. We do not hand out penalties for asking questions, so feel free. Moment of silence there. Or maybe everything was clear. It seems it was. So what I will do, and there's usually two questions. One is, where could we reach you if there's a problem? And the other is, will we get this presentation? And the answer to the second one is yes, we will get this presentation. So I share this with the organizers in a few minutes in a PDF format, so you will have access to everything that I talked about, and also access to the links where you can explore further. And within the slides, you also had my email address, so you'll be able to write me there if there's something that comes up and you'd like to look into that. I'm not promising that I'll answer straight away, but I will do my best to answer to you real quick during this weekend. Oh, I think there's maybe this session is recorded and will be uploaded. Yes, so thank you, Hans, for mentioning that. Link is very helpful for YouTube recording, indeed. But what we can do is I will share these links as well with the presenters, and they can add the links into the discussion of into the description of the video on YouTube. So Claudius, thank you for pointing that out and giving us this opportunity to share attention. Where do we find the links from the slides? So Hans, I don't know if you are here, if you can mention how this will be shared with the participants.
Exactly. So first of all, thank you very much, Peter. That was a really nice talk, and I, for one, took a lot. I learned a lot, I have to say. Really well constipated, and thank you very much for this.
My pleasure.
So, and for all of you who'd like to see the slides, so this is a recorded YouTube session, and we're going to upload it on our channel, on our Versus Virus channel, and there will also be a link to the slides in the YouTube video's description where you can access the slides.
Okay, and how are you sharing the recording and the file with the people? Is there, like, I don't know, mailing list or some central repository where they have access to it?
So we will mention it during our updates, of course. So but we'll also put it on our Slack channels and on our website.
Perfect. All right. So if there's no last-minute questions, then that's it from me. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you, Hans and Versus Virus teams, for having me again, and hope to talk to you all again soon.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.